Good morning. My name is Scott Litke, and I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Holocaust Education. Welcome to our annual third Thursday Lunch and Learn. We are thrilled today to have Alex Cardon with us from the Bak Museum, the Learning Center, the Samuel Bak Museum, the Learning Center here in Omaha. She is the curator at the museum and a person we are honored to be working with on so many different levels. This has been both an amazing education and personal experience working with the Bak Museum, and we're honored to be involved with many different education programs with Bak. And one thing that I personally have really enjoyed is every time that I go to the museum, I will stand in front of one of Bak's works, and Alex enlightens us with his work, and I learn something new every time. And so I asked her to be our presenter. Jane and I both asked her to be our presenter in this month because we are just so thrilled to be working again with Bak, and it's an experience and a place that if you haven't had a chance to go, you need to. So Alex, I turn it over to you, and I will now mute myself.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jane, for inviting me to take part of your Lunch and Learn series. It's really exciting. And I do enjoy our collaboration so much. It's been incredibly meaningful to have the IHE Holocaust Education Program in the museum, and just wonderful to see all these middle and high schoolers coming through and learning so much about a history that they seem incredibly uncertain on when they come in through the door. So yeah, it's a really great collaboration. So today I want to present, I sort of wrote down my proposed program for the Lunch and Learn. So I first want to talk about the museum project and how it came about. I want to tell you then about the life of Samuel Bak and our upcoming exhibition, which is going to be very different from the work that we've shown so far. Let's see. Samuel Bak is an artist who's really dedicated his career as an artist to be a witness to the Holocaust, but also to condemn ongoing cycles of violence and war, hate, and genocide that took place around the world. And so you see him as an artist from about the 1970s to today. He's 90 years old and he paints every day in his studio, wrestling with not only his personal experience and the experience of other survivors, but also with his contemporary politics, as to how he can represent this world that is in pain and always on the brink of self-destruction. So the Samuel Bak Museum, the Learning Center, is part of a collaboration with Mr. Bak, where art becomes the preface for conversations around issues of social justice, Holocaust education, genocide, but also human rights. The goal is to engage with his work and invite the community and the universities of Omaha to participate in these conversations. So in 2020, Mr. Bak donated 512 paintings that span the length of his career to the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And his goal was to open a center, an education center on campus that would be dedicated to the study of these really heavy subjects that would engage the university constituents, but also the general public, the regional public, and hopefully national and international as we go. I'm currently in collaboration with another museum that hosts a large collection of his in Vilnius in Lithuania, which is his hometown. The future space, we are in a temporary location currently, will be dedicated to education and discussion, at the center of which will be the museum, with galleries dedicated to presenting his artworks, but also galleries for contemporary artists, be they traditional 2D artists, musicians, performers. So these galleries will be dedicated to their work in conversation with Samuel Bak's work. And then there'll be additional space for lectures, performances, etc. This came about because of an exhibition that was done in 2019 that was organized by Mark Selensak, who's the executive director of the SAM and Francis Frieda Holocaust and Genocide Academy. He partnered with Samuel Bak's gallery, the Pucker Gallery in Boston, to create an exhibition called Witness, the Art of Samuel Bak. It was also in partnership with UNO's Nathan and Hannah Schwab Center for Israel and Jewish Studies, and then it was hosted in UNO School of the Art Gallery, which is in Weber Fine Arts. There were 70 works of art, and it was incredibly successful. It saw 4,500 visitors, over 2,000 of which were high school students that went on tours of the space. And then the Goldstein Center for Human Rights and the Fried Academy partnered on a symposium, which brought scholars from around the world to discuss art and human rights issue and the Holocaust. It also engaged students and community docents into conversations around Holocaust and commemoration. So, sorry, the title's messed up. We have future priorities that are steps towards the creation of a permanent home for the Samuel Bak Museum on campus. So we want to create this permanent facility, build a new building on UNO's campus, and be a partner and collaborator with all the facets of the university. We want to be a source of collaboration and opportunities for students, faculty, and staff, and the broader community around art, Holocaust education, human rights, and genocide. And then also be an active organization and collaborator with Omaha's art and cultural landscape, because ultimately, while Sam is a witness, he's also an artist. And if you asked him, he would say, I'm an artist first. So we've had 2 exhibitions in this temporary space so far. Our first one was curated by Samuel Bak, and it was a broad retrospective of his career, starting with drawings that he did as a refugee in the displaced person camp in Landsberg, Germany, where he and his mother fled to from Lithuania. And our fall 23 exhibitions focused on these paintings of forced migration that spoke of his survival of the Holocaust, but also the process of reconstructing his life after trauma and the ongoing plight of people today who are fleeing conflict and genocide. So all of our exhibitions are going to follow the semester schedule to be able to work with our university professors and students. So we are open basically end of January to end of June, and then early August to early December. And then we have closures the rest of the time to change over the exhibitions. So our temporary location, for those of you who live in Omaha, is next to Voodoo Taco in Exarban. I think that's everyone's landmark so far. So right at the entrance to Exarban, if you come from Center Street, there's free parking in front of the building and in the back of the building, and you enter through the lobby of 2289 South 67th Street, and it opens on the back parking lot and the front. We're open to the public Wednesday, Friday, Saturday from 10 to 4, and Thursdays from 10 to 6 p.m., Sundays from noon to 4 p.m. And daily we have in-person tours that our student workers lead. We also have an audio tour if you want to self-guide, family-friendly activities. Twice a month on Sundays, we're going to have a new program called Encounters with Bak, where one of the students or the gallery managers will talk about a specific work and put it in relationship with Bak's career. And we're also hosting an Emerging Artist series, which is free and open to the public, where a local artist is going to come in and discuss how we commemorate, what it means to hold space for different histories, what it means to speak of those histories and bring people together. Mondays and Tuesdays are reserved for partnerships, so university groups, our IHE programming, and K through 12 student groups. And then finally on Thursday nights, we have curator lecture series and guest exhibition series that I've seen a few of you at. Each of our curator talks and our exhibition talks will be starting this semester with a flute performance by flautists from the music department. And you can find all this information on our website. So this semester, in terms of guest lecturers, we'll have Bridget Sandoff. We'll talk about Etruscan archaeology after World War II and the difficulty of archaeology in Italy after Nazis and fascists co-opted Roman history in the construction of their empires. On March 7th, we'll have Adrian Duran, who'll talk about the 1950s and 60s in Italy and how people wrestled with how to represent the Holocaust in the arts. On April 4th, we're still in talk with an author who will talk about Jewish and Lakota histories in the region and the arrival of Eastern European Jews to this region. And it should be a fascinating roundtable that will have professors of Native American history discussing her book with her. Jeanette Gabriel from the Schwab Center will be talking on the Eichmann trial, and Christy Beard will give a performance and talk about the music of the Holocaust and her research on that topic in June. So that's our lecture series. The artist workshop will be done at the end of the month I think we're going to move the February dates, it's so close, but probably we'll do March, 2 in April, 1 in May, and 1 in June. So who's Samuel Bak? You know, I've said his name a lot so far, but some of you might not be familiar with who he is. Samuel Bak was born in Vilna, which was at that moment in time a Polish town, which was soon taken over by Lithuanians and was renamed Vilnius. So he was born in 1933 to an upper middle class family, very well to do. And he had this golden childhood until a series of invasions happened. First, Soviet Russians arrived, trying to stem the tide of the push of the Nazi army into Eastern Europe. The Germans arrived in 1941 and occupied Vilnius. As a child, he was seen to be incredibly gifted, and he had this very few years where his grandparents and his parents encouraged him to draw as much as possible. So from the age of about 6 to 9, he was going to art classes and really trying to figure out what it meant to be this talented kid. But in 1941, with the arrival of the Nazis, his entire existence was upended. This upper middle class Jewish family was forced to wear the yellow star. Sam participated in the sewing of the yellow star on his family's clothing. And soon they were taken to Ghetto 1 in Vilnius. Him and his mother were taken there and forced to live in these dreadful conditions. His mother realized that this was going to be a place of death for them, so she ran through the ghetto looking for an exit and found one, and they escaped to a convent. So here I'm showing you a photograph of Samuel Bak and his grandfather, and then Samuel Bak today in his studio, age 90. So this deportation of Jews led to the immediate death of his 4 grandparents. As the only child, they really believed in trying to save him as the future generation of the family. And so his mother, when they flee the ghetto, takes him to this convent where his great aunt was best friends with a nun there. And this nun agreed to hide them. So they hid in the attic of this convent until the Nazis arrested the nuns as Soviet collaborators. And at that moment in time, they found a group of Jewish workers and hid among them and walked into Ghetto 2. The fact that she saved him from Ghetto 1 was incredible because Ghetto 1 was the first one that was liquidated. It's where all women and children and elderly were held. And everyone who lived there was taken to the killing fields in Panari, shot and buried in mass graves. So he lives in the Ghetto 2, from about the end of 1941 to 1943. And this was a fascinating moment for him as a child because resistance came in 2 forms in Vilnius. So it was an armed resistance with partisans hiding in the woods around Panari and attacking Nazi soldiers from outside the city. But there was also a cultural resistance taking place in the ghetto. One that was of great importance to Sam as this budding artist. Basically, the poets Sotvikar, Kovner, and Kazarginsky were leading a cultural resistance to counter Nazi narratives that were saying that Jewish people were subhuman and had no culture. So they had plays and operas and music performances in the ghetto so that people outside the walls of the ghetto would hear them and understand that culture would survive this oppression. In March of 1943, they become aware of this young child artist who's taking classes with painting classes with one of their friends. And so they invite this 9-year-old boy to have an exhibition in the ghetto, and that's Sam's first exhibition. And it's a seminal moment because it's a time where he's basically told that he has a role as an artist, and that is to commemorate contemporary events. That is to capture what's happening in the world around him and show it to others. In 43, his father, who's rejoined them in the ghetto, is forced to go to a labor camp, HKP 526. And his mother and him will join him at that camp in September of 24. The Nazi who was running that camp didn't believe in the final solution, and so invited 1,500 women and children who were related to his workers to move to the camp. And so he saved those people from the destruction of the Vilna ghetto and the extermination of all of its inhabitants. However, the Gestapo was angered by this and kept leading incursions against the camp. In March of 1944, 250 children at the camp are rounded up under the excuse of getting vaccinated and are shot in front of their horrified parents. Samuel and a little girl are the only two survivors of this moment, and his father realizes that he has to hide him, so rolls him up in this very thin mattress and hides him under the bed, and then puts him in a cloth sack and lowers him 3 days later over this wall. And he's able to be reunited with his mother, who'd fled the work camp when this attack against the children took place. So they will hide with 10 other people back in the convent where they first were hiding. The nuns had come back, and they hide behind these bookcases for the last 3 months of the war. On the 2nd and 3rd of July, 1944, all the remainder workmen of the camp are rounded up and shot. And so that was 10 days before Vilna's liberation. And so Samuel Bak and his mother emerge from the security of the convent when the Soviet forces arrive and discover that their entire family had been exterminated. At this moment in time, they stay in Vilna because they're hoping for news of surviving family and friends, or waiting for people to come back from camps. But they soon realize that it's untenable for them to stay there under Soviet rule. One of the big reasons for it is that Sam was taking painting classes, and the Soviets discovered that he was a talented artist, and they wanted to separate him from his mother and send him to Moscow to a school for gifted artists. And that was just horrific, this idea that mother and child were going to be separated. And so they fled first to Poland, where they faced a lot of anti-Semitism. The Polish population of Lodz was displeased with the return of survivors and this attempt to return to their homes and regain their stolen possessions. And so they fled to Berlin and made it to Tempelhof. And they did this all with illegal papers, dodging Soviet soldiers who were trying to stem the tide of Eastern Europeans from fleeing Soviet rule. And finally, they meet American soldiers that agree to smuggle them through Soviet-occupied Germany to Bavaria, and they live for a long time in the displaced person camp in Germany until the State of Israel was founded in 1948, at which point they embark onto a final migration on the Pan-York. And Sam will live in Tel Aviv until he's about 23. He'll do his military service there and then go to art school in Paris. And this is a difficult time for him, as I'll speak about in a little bit. But over his lifetime, having become a witness in the 70s in his painting, he's woven his Holocaust experience with his life story, with contemporary events to create this iconography of modern history. And he's really invested in calling attention to injustice and inequities that exist in society from his childhood to today. So becoming a witness from abstraction to figuration is our upcoming exhibition. It looks to Sam's life from the age of 23 until his 40s. When he arrives in Paris, he's an artist who's been trained at the Bezalel School of Arts in Israel. He is an artist who's really focused on depicting the creation of an Israeli state by depicting the life of workmen who are building these new cities, about agricultural life, and about the realities of living in Israel. But when he arrives in Paris, he feels somewhat freed from that obligation and starts realizing that the European art world is really invested in abstraction. It's a moment of tension for European artists. A lot of them have read Theodor Adorno, who says basically to return to pre-war forms of culture would be barbaric, because that's the culture that led to the rise of Nazis and fascists, that led to concentration camps. And so European artists embrace abstraction as a way of expunging the traumas of the war, as a way of participating in the arts without returning to modernism, to the work of Picasso, the Surrealists, who all seem corrupt at this point. All seem to have like artists colluded or fled the Nazis. It was very unclear as to like what art forms would be acceptable. So Sam arrives in Paris and he starts seeing abstract art in galleries and plays with that. And so you see Stone Bridges here in 1958 that's done in his first year in Paris as a student. He's rapidly disillusioned with the Beaux-Arts in Paris, which he says is regressive. And so he really focuses on galleries and museums to study art. But I'm showing you next to this painting what he does later in life. So how does he go from one to the other? What are the events that happened in his life that encouraged him to become this witness that we speak of today? With ongoing, we have one of Sam's recurring symbols, that is of a pear, which becomes a way for him to depict humanity without showing the horrors of reality. Because one of the difficulties artists face is how do you depict the Holocaust? How do you depict the millions of people who've lost their lives without horrifying the viewer, without turning them off? As we've all experienced today with social media, we see images of war over and over and over again. And after a while, we can become numb to them. We can become so accustomed to this extreme violence that we see on our televisions, even in popular culture, that we forget that the reality, the humanness of these conflicts. We forget the psychological effects it has upon those going through those moments. We forget the actual terror. I speak to my students a lot about Marvel movies, how we see the heroes, superheroes that are winning, but we don't look at the thousands of lives that they're destroying. I always think back to one of the latest Avengers movie where they have this plane that crashes from the sky with millions of people on it. And the movie's like, yay, we won. But there's no understanding of what it means to every single other movie participant or what that looks like in a theater of war. So with ongoing, the pair turns into the spiral and you see these cities of flame that happen over and over again. The pair is surrounded by dye. It speaks to the uncertainty of life. We never know when our peaceful world's going to be upturned by conflict. We're very fortunate in Nebraska to live in a very stable space that allows us to pursue interests and education and live fulfilling lives. But depending on the place you live in the world, that conflict might be hovering over you. You can think of the Ukraine and how this country is engulfed in war. And the difficult lives that individuals are leading. A few years ago, they lived in peace. Suddenly their world is being destroyed. And so Sam, throughout his career, will present these. But what led him to that? In the 50s, he's really invested in abstraction, as I said, as this way of capturing the pain of the world around him, the destructions that are ongoing after World War II. But also he's hiding his pain. He's hiding his memories there. Europeans are not interested in the testimony of survivors of the Holocaust. They say that everyone has suffered during World War II. People went to prisoner of war camps. People went to concentration camps. Everyone had been oppressed by the Nazis. And so it's a spirit of reconciliation that forces survivors to suppress their memories. You have individuals in Italy where Samuel moved to, like Primo Levi, who are writing about these experiences very early on. But ultimately, the mainstream doesn't want to hear about it. The art world doesn't want to hear about it. So he paints scenes of destructions in these very abstract ways in order to convey his sorrow, but only he really knows what's taking place here. Fréjus is the site of one of the biggest natural disasters after World War II, when the dam at Malpasset in southern France broke overnight, and the tidal wave of contained water covered the town of Fréjus and killed 400 people and led to this massive mudslide all the way into the Mediterranean. It was a natural disaster that was televised. They made postcards about it. People were incredibly aware of this in Europe, and for him, it represented that tidal wave of destruction that happened during World War II. So he paints about it in these very abstract ochre tones. But can you see? I don't know if you can see my cursor, but here there's a building at the back that appears in every single photograph. When you Google the name Fréjus flood, this building appears, and then you have these tree-like structures that speak of the destruction of nature, as well as cities. With Red City, and I would like you to come see this painting in person, because it's so much more brilliant than it is on this slide. You get the sense of a burning city. You have allusions very early on in Sam's work to Greek and Roman mythology, classical age, Roman Empire, Etruscans. Here, when you look at the painting, you think burning city, you can think back to Nero. He's living in Rome. He's obsessed with the city, the history of that city. So is he depicting Rome burning under Nero, or is he representing the world burning during World War II? Or is it the trauma of living in an increasingly tense world under nuclear threat, seeing the devastation of Hiroshima? Here's an artist who is constantly weaving these narratives together. So what led Sam to shift styles? What led him to become a witness to the Holocaust? There's two major events in his life. One is the trial of Adolf Eichmann, 61-62, that followed his arrest in 1960s and deportation from Latin America to Israel. He was a German-Austrian official of the Nazi Party, an officer of the Schutzstaffel, and one of the major organizers of the Holocaust. He participated in the Wannsee conference that basically led to the implementation of the final solution to the Jewish question. And he was tasked by SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich with the facilitation and managing of all the logistics that led to the mass deportations of millions of Jews to Nazi ghettos and to extermination camp across German-occupied Europe. So the trial is held in Jerusalem, but most importantly, it was televised. And it woke the world to the realities of the Holocaust. People watched this trial and suddenly understood what Jewish people had been trying to convey to them for years now. There are 110 witnesses that stand in the courtroom, testifying to their experience, including Abba Kovner, the poet and Vilna partisan fighter who gave Sam his first exhibition in the ghetto. And Kovner's courage and testimony basically revealed to Bak that he had an obligation to move beyond his hidden paintings, his paintings of hidden trauma, and to participate in the creation of collective memory. He told me straight up that he did not watch the trial, that he preferred listening to Mozart and painting than to reliving the traumas of his childhood, that he couldn't do it. His mother, when they were living in the displaced person camp in Germany, met her second husband and they married. He was a survivor of Dachau, who lost his wife and two daughters to the concentration camp. And so his entire life, he was living with that trauma of his stepfather, who would wake up at night screaming, as well as his own. So he's part of this European avant-garde of artists that struggled with how one represented the horrors of the Holocaust. How do you engage people in the act of commemoration? How do you get them to understand the scale of the genocide? how do you get people to relate without showing them pictures of camps and dead bodies? And as I told you, in this day of social media, we're part of that same problem. Like, how do we commemorate these moments of war without focusing on the horror, getting people to engage? So after this trial, he starts in the 60s to think about how one can excavate Jewish life and culture. He has a country house in Tarquina, which is basically the center of the Etruscan world. And he starts watching these excavations of tombs. In Italy, archaeologists want to continue to work, but after the fascists co-opting Roman culture, excavation of ancient Rome was problematic. And so archaeologists turned to excavating the Etruscans, a population that was suppressed by the Romans, and their culture was literally buried, and they were subsumed into the Roman Empire. And Bak relates that, along with a series of other artists and writers, including Giorgio Bassani, who writes The Garden of the Fizzicontis. I don't know if you've read that, but it's a fantastic book. They all relate the excavation of Jewish life to the excavation of Etruscan tombs. And so here you see two paintings that replicate Etruscan aesthetics, what he's seen in these tombs, but enter into a conversation about Jewish culture. So with Etruscan still life of 1963, we see a still life of ritualistic objects done in the colors of the Israeli flag to talk about this not only Jewish ceremonies, but also the domestic sphere that he lost during the war. And so you see the painting surface is cracking and he's restored it, just like archaeologists were doing to Etruscan murals. In Etruscan War, Birds and Warrior, you have this battle of birds taking place that reminds us of the aerial battles that were taking place above Europe and the bombings. But at the center, you have one that's protected by this circle, and this flight seems to be soaring upwards in victory. So Bach starts to engage with the concept of collective memory at this time. Collective memories are shared representation of a group's past based on their common identity. And it's basically individuals coming together and sharing their experiences and cultural artifacts. This is something he realized he underwent in the camps, specifically in the refugee camp, where survivors swap stories. He's there with 5,000 other people that are in conversation with each other and trying to figure out how to rebuild lives after destruction. So for him, cultural memory meant that he had a duty to represent the collective memory of survivors, but also the lives lost. And so here you have a painting called Collective Memory that he does in 1996, where you see a very small human being standing in a field of monuments that have decayed over time, with the hands of time crushed by rocks. And it speaks to how do you hold on and how do you commemorate the Holocaust over generations? The first generation built massive monuments to this moment. But over the course of generations, how do we maintain that memory? How do we maintain those conversations? How do we hold space for the memory of those who were killed in that moment in time? With distance, will that memory erode, like these sculptures? And so this figure that's looking down among these statues is actively commemorating, and you get the sense that he's going to pass that message on to the next generation, very much like the IHE does in their educational programs. The second major event is that of Robert Rauschenberg's exhibition in 1964 at the Venice Biennale, which Sam sees. And so here I'm showing you Rauschenberg among the paintings that he showed at the Biennale, which created collective memory of the contemporary moment through a layering of images. So you see an astronaut, JFK, among abstract painting, everything's layered together, and people related to these images, these early pop art images, because they understood the story that Rauschenberg was telling. And Sam gets really excited about this because he realizes that through layering of form, he can start telling his history. And so you'll walk into gallery 3 at the exhibition and you'll realize it's this moment of experimentation. So all the paintings are like bing, 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 all different styles. You see an artist who's exploring and trying to figure out the path forward. So I love this small drawing emerging, which is basically a collage and layering of different themes that he's playing with. So the labyrinth, which becomes symbolic, which relates to the ghetto, labyrinths that have been leveled, the ghettos that have been leveled, being locked into a space and unable to escape. But then behind you have figures emerging from boxes. These are the figures, the people that emerge in his mind, that are no longer being suppressed, but are coming out of these boxes that he's closed previously. These are the people that he has to represent. So Celestial Fold is this turning point for him in 1967, where you see this brand new style embraced and this resolution of his search for how to represent the Holocaust. When you're far away from the painting, you go, oh, this is like a beautiful Vermeer of a wonderful town. And it's very Northern Renaissance with the, 3/4 of the canvas dedicated to the sky and this altar-like frame. But as you get close, you realize that it's a destroyed city. It's empty of its inhabitants. Behind, you have crematorium towers. So it speaks to the destruction of the ghetto and the killing of the Jewish European population. They were taken to these concentration camps. And you realize that nature is overgrown. So this is collective memory, but over time, like what happens to these spaces of destruction? How do we think about these entire towns that were decimated by Nazi forces, and how do we hold space for that commemoration? And suddenly that cloud above that seems so fluffy and beautiful at your first glance becomes ominous. You get the sense of a storm that has overtaken this land. And perhaps the light coming through offers this note of hope that the storm has passed and all that you have left are the ruins. But how do you excavate ruins? How do you live after this moment of destruction? And so in this final room, we'll have a series of works, One Man Island, which speaks to Bach leaving Rome, abandoning his career as an abstract painter, and living in this space by himself. He went from being a really active member of the artistic avant-garde and being connected to all these major artists to being rejected. His gallery dumps him because he starts painting in a figurative manner. They're like, we're abstract. You can't be part of this world anymore. And so his move to Israel coincides to this complete revolution in his life, where he figures out that through a combination of surrealist imagery and Renaissance imagery, he can bring together this very unique style. And so you have him here standing next to this giant die with his suitcases on either side, having just arrived on this island that's filled with ruins and smokestacks and his memories, basically, with this boat in the distance that left him behind. And he's in the middle of stormy waters. He speaks very much of that tension of his memories. You get the sense of this island could get overtaken by these waves in the same way that he could be overtaken by the trauma. In Slice of Life, he's showing us what's happening in his mind. These beings crying out for recognition, coming out of this box of memory that he really shut down when he was an abstract artist, and that demand representation. And he's telling us, these are my goals as a painter, and I want to be this witness to the Holocaust. The last work is called Burden, and it speaks, it's done in 2017. It speaks of a lifetime of being a witness, of testifying, the weight of memory and how it sort of strangles him a little bit. It looks light in parts, but it's also incredibly heavy. And he carries this burning candle to commemorate over and over these lives lost. And it'll be right next to a presentation on how we commemorate today. What roles do memorials and monuments hold for us in this day and age? There's been a lot of debates about monuments in the United States in 2023, and it forces us to consider what histories we commemorate. Why do we remember these moments in time? Why is it important to commemorate the Holocaust? Why is it important to commemorate other cycles of genocide? And how do we do it as a society? And so here I'm showing you slides from the section on Holocaust memorials, specifically in Europe. So we have the monument to the Jews of Europe in Berlin, Rachel Wright Reed's Jewish monument in Vienna, at the center of the ghetto. The hall that commemorates the French Jewish populations that were deported. So each of those little gold sort of like bumps that you see along this long corridor have the name and dates of birth and death. So a lot of question marks there of people that were deported, and there's a whole section of that wall that's blank. And then the stumbling stone projects that is throughout Europe, where cobblestones are placed in front of people's house that commemorate the deported, and also the ovens in Dachau, and how concentration camps have become spaces of commemoration and spaces of reflection and turned into museums. So that's where the exhibition will end. The call to action for this one, is a call to action for with every exhibition, is getting people to enter into that space of commemoration and to pass on their histories, to actively participate in the creation of collective memory, and to hold space for commemorations of the Holocaust. So I'll end my presentation there and take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. If you, it was amazing. Could you just stop sharing your
Yeah,
screen? There we
there we
go.
go.
Everybody's back on. I'll ask the first question.
Okay.
What's next for Bak? I mean, obviously he's 90, he paints every day. I love the conversations back and forth of the things he's working on, but
Yeah.
what does he see as next? I know that at one time you said that he's always painting, but he also has all these works that he started but hasn't finished. So what's next for him?
Yeah, so his painting practice is really interesting because he starts with incredibly small canvases and then grows them to these large scale canvases that sort of dominate the room. So this exhibition is much smaller paintings compared to what you've seen so far. And the next exhibition will be massive paintings. And so you have all these small paintings that fill his studio that he sometimes destroys, sometimes holds on to. And so he's trying right now to create two collections, one for the Vilnius Museum, which has a collection of about 300 paintings, and one for the collection here at the University of Nebraska Museum. So his goal is to distribute those across these two institutions so that these museums can keep showing this work. There's a lot of works on paper that we are really grateful that he's going to donate to us that showcase his art and exploration as an artist. But so he really wants to build these two institutions up and create centers for discussion about the Holocaust and these wars that are taking place that are plaguing us continuously. So yeah, he's dedicated. He's he's going to do this his entire life.
Thank you. Steve Weiss asked, how did the family photographs survive given everything that the Bak family did?
So there's very few of them. He had one great aunt who had converted to Catholicism as a child. She was adopted. And so those photographs come predominantly from her. They're also found, there's some, his drawings that he does in the ghetto are found after the war. The poets that I mentioned excavated the ghetto and saved all the artifacts that they could find. And one of those was a book called the Pinkas, which had a list of every single Jewish resident of Vilnius. And they'd given it to Samuel Bak to draw in because there's scarcity of paper and they wanted him to capture the world around him. That book is currently held at the Vilnius Museum. And you can also look at a digitized copy on the Kunstarchive. They have every single page scanned. And so you can see the drawings of this young boy that go from drawings of his daily life to more fantastical things like representations of knights. He is 9 years old at the end of the day, and so he's hoping for a savior to come in. He talks a lot about hoping a plane or a great bird would come down and take him away from that place. But so there are people actively engaged in the preservation of artifacts that they found in the ghetto, and some of those are the photographs.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Please feel free to take yourself off mute. Larry, please.
I have a question. You mentioned, thank you very much for your talk. It was terrific.
Of course.
You mentioned that this came out of an exhibit in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong. I've been wrong a lot. I'm getting old. Wasn't there an exhibit earlier than that in Omaha of some of his paintings?
I think that's probably the 2019 exhibition. I think that Mark Selensack had been working with the Pucker Gallery for several years, so he might have brought some paintings earlier than that. But our institutional memory really starts.
And where
in
was that
2019.
first exhibit?
So the 2019 exhibit was in Weber Fine Arts.
On
UNO's
campus?
campus. On UNO's campus, so the Dodge campus.
Well, I'm thinking about an exhibit that I thought years before that at the, what's the name of that building on the edge of the old market, that big 5-story building where it's a sort of an arts complex?
Oh, the Bemis?
The Bemis. There was an
that's-
exhibit there of art, of Holocaust art, and I thought it was Samuel Bak's paintings, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it was Samuel Bak, but I'll double check with them. Thank you.
Now, there were also, though, Bach did, there've been, I know the museum in Houston, the Holocaust facility in
Yes.
Houston, like in the last 10 years had an exhibit. I mean, there's been other places. I personally learned about
Mhm.
Bach at a symposium I was at, actually at Yad Vashem, where he was
Mhm.
also honored 15 years ago or so. So
Yeah.
there've been other, but this has
There
been
was some exhibit down at the Bemis years ago, but it must not have been Samuel Bak. I thought it was.
Maybe awesome.
What
Chris is
what
a good guy.
what have been the reactions from students that I mean, we've seen on our end, but when the groups that you've been working with, what's the
Mhm.
reaction to Bach's work?
I mean, one, they're overwhelmed. I think that's the general reaction is they don't know what kind of space they're walking into. There's a timidity, I guess, around interacting with art objects. People feel very insecure. But professors have been excellent from across all the departments at the university at bringing their students here and looking at the exhibitions in terms of their syllabus and the classes they're teaching. So they understand the Holocaust after understand the scale of it. They understand the human reactions. They understand what it means to be a survivor. They enter into conversations about it. I think I had this horrifying moment when I was teaching at the Memphis College of Art where I was talking about Auschwitz and I paused and I said, do you know what I'm talking about? And they were like, yeah, that's that prison for famous people. And I was like, what? So I had to like start off with the Holocaust education. And I realized it was that generational gap, and that was 10 years ago. So the students that we're getting have a vague understanding of European history, but they don't understand the scale of it either. So Sam's work really allows them to enter into that conversation with history. But also it brings it home to them. We had an exhibition about forced migration and talked about Sam's forced migration. Every single first generation student, every single child that was coming through that had gone through migration was like, that's my experience. I feel I understand what Sam is portraying when he shows us broken beings, when he shows us people wanting to take flight but being grounded. There was a way that Sam's able to communicate his experience to a younger generation, where it becomes a human experience and not something that some artist who's 90 years old has painted. So yeah, it's been really cool. And we've hosted difficult conversations, but it's incredibly worthwhile.
Other questions? Alex, as always, this is amazing. I will say Alex also was very enlightening for me with in that my first trip to Poland, I found that I was taking pictures of everything, and we were talking about hiding behind the camera, and she talked to me about how when she works with students about how they have to first view the painting, just use your eyes. And so my second trip, I tried that, and I found it also just another that you were able to see all the layers or begin to see the layers. And so I was grateful for that advice.
Yeah, there are paintings that do demand some time in front of them. You can walk by them very quickly, of course. You can do that for anything. But if you stop and start looking at one detail, you realize that there's so many stories being told in one painting. So you can come back over and over again because the museum is free.
I would encourage, if you're in Omaha, if you're coming to visit, that you absolutely go there. Jane and I have been talking about how every time you see the same painting, when you look at it the next time, you see something different. And it's an amazing opportunity. We're so happy and thrilled that we can work together, but we all have big plans together of where we're going with everything. And so again, thank you so much for being here. Next month, we have our newest member of our Speakers Bureau, Edie Sabari, who is a second-generation Holocaust survivor, will be talking about her parents' experience. And so we're honored to have her to be able to present, and look for further programming as we go on through the year. Alex, thank you again.
Thank you again. This is wonderful. Such an honor.
Thank you, and we'll see you all next month.